Okay, I have a low battery alert here, but I have to do some things to the tractor, to the Model A. I was driving it the other day and I stepped on the brakes to turn it, and it seems like something happened to one of the two brakes. I can't remember. The other day is a year ago. So what we're going to have to do is take these brakes off. They're held on by two, let's see here, two bolts right there and one right there, and then they just slide out the whole brake mechanism. You want to make sure this is already in neutral and it's not going anywhere, but you want to, if your tractor's on an incline or something, you might want to address that. When you take the brakes out, you don't have any brakes. Hey, another thing is I don't have a guard on that flywheel. I don't care whether I have a guard on it really or not, but because of my oil pressure problem, which I will explain to you later, it slings oil all over you and the tractor while it's running. So I need to put a guard around there until I get my oil pressure problem fixed. And the seal in there is bad too, but that's that. And then I also have a sound coming from the front of the engine. I think it's the rocker arms. So we'll have to look at those and address that as well. Alright, I'm almost dead, so I'm going to shut you off. Okay, what you have to do is you have to take this cotter pin off, take the nut off, then this washer comes off and this bolt comes out, or not this bolt, but this big gear. Then if your tractor's maintained, you can loosen this up and it backs the brake shoes up so you can take them apart. So that's what I've done here. And I wanted to see if my brake shoes had come off the pads, or the pads had come off the shoes, or something savage happened. I don't see anything. Nothing's loose or bad. I think the reason why it got lost a lot of the shoe, or lost a lot of the brake, is because this has got a big deep groove in it. It's not very nice, not very pretty. I just put it together so it have brakes, and they need to break in. So I'm thinking what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this together, back together, and I'll tighten it up a little bit more. Like I said, it's very important that your adjuster gets some attention when you take those apart right there, because if you can't adjust them, it's really difficult to get it out. And these are, I've seen a lot of these tractor brakes on these old John Deeres, and they are just problematic because nobody ever does anything to them. You know, you don't need brakes on a tractor. Well, they're nice to have for turning. So I'm gonna put this back together and tighten it up. I'm going to check the other one too, and if they're okay, I'm just going to put them right back on the tractor. Nice. This has to come off, and it weighs 160 pounds. So let's see what's got to come off. Looks like the starter's got to be backed off a little bit. There's a couple of bolts on the inside. I'll have to look at those. It's keyed, so we don't have to worry about that. What I do have to worry about is it weighs 160 pounds. So I think maybe what I'll do, I can get a 2x4 up there, probably this way, and I'll build a little frame out of 2x4s, see if it'll go in there, little box, and have some legs on it so it'll support it, and I get my lift, table lift underneath it probably. I've done it before using a cherry picker, and it's really squirrely, it goes all over the place. So Okay, let's get our lift and tools. Staple that all together with that. Cut it like right there. Another one across there. So I'm going to lift up on this. It supports it. Trouble is, I can't get the whole thing underneath there. I'm still going to be doing a balancing act. But I'll be able to let it down. I can let it down easy enough. And we just kind of got to get it out of the way, so it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be. I'll bet you I can get it back up in there with that too. Okay, let's cut these and staple them together. Noise alert. Okay, that looks terrible, but it'll work. Yeah, it's quite a bit, and it's snug right up against there. I can pull it back, and then I can drop it down enough to wheel it out of the way. And it'll probably stay there reasonably. Should stay there without having too much trouble. I'm going to put some more staples in this, see if I can't beef it up just a little bit more, and see if that's going to stay out of the way. Yeah, kind of glad I put that on, kind of, but I can't. Okay, alright, that'll work. Put some more staples in it. We'll get some wrenches and start unbolting that. Can't wait. That's going to be fun. I've moved the starter out of the way, and I have a piece of cardboard kind of blocking that positive. And I've got two extension and ratchet, and I had to break it loose with this pipe, but I had to use my little shorty to break it loose to get it in there. It was a mess. 2 bolts. They're going to be hard to get out. So I don't know how these guys worked on them with just ordinary wrenches. There's a special wrench, I believe, that goes behind here that you use, but I don't have that special wrench, so making do with what I have. They have square ends that fit into bosses, so when you're taking these off, you have to have one hand pushing the bolt through and one hand ratcheting. So I can't necessarily film while I'm doing this. Probably then what we'll do is we'll jam something in there and hit it a couple of times and respring it, and it should rock off of there. The other one did. Alright. That one over there when I pulled that one off. So, we'll see. I got both of those off there. Can't really get it cracked loose where I'm not, can wiggle it or anything. So what I'm going to do, I took these off of where my implements go. Just a couple of bolts. And originally there's a cover that goes on this to use your steering wheel to hand crank it, believe it or not. Yeah, And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a couple pieces of plate and weld them together and cut holes in them here, and in the center, and I'll weld a big bolt with or a big nut on the top with a bolt, and I'll tighten this whole thing up, and I'll start, squeezing it in, and it'll bump it off there. So I'm done for today, though. I'm not ready to get out and weld, so probably tomorrow we'll have a look at this. And the miracle of camera, it'll be in 1 second. So I'm going to make some measurements on this paint stick, where the bolts need to go and the center of that, and then I'm going to transfer this to steel. So let me write this down. I have 2 pieces of 1/4 inch plate, and this can act as a handle. Probably lay that one on top, and I'll weld these so it's a 1/2 inch thick. Then I've got something to hold on to, and then I can bore my holes, because it doesn't matter what the outside of it looks like as long as the holes are in there. And then what I can do is I'll use this nut and weld it to the center, because there'll be a hole in there. Cut this off and weld that there as a T-handle to crank down on it. I don't have another nut, other words, I just weld another nut onto it and use a socket on it with a ratchet, but I don't have another nut, so I'll have to use that piece of steel for a T. So okay, let's get cutting. Probably want to cut right about here. I'm going to clean up my edges with this diamond paper. I also need to clean up these edges too on this here. Okay, I've got a new welder I'm trying out. Essentially what I'm doing is I've got a battery there, and I've got another battery up there, and so when you double that 12 volts, you got 36 volts there. And I got jumper cables going to them, and you can just ground the table with your jumper cable. And I know you're supposed to use welding rod, but the uncoated coat hangers are the same as 6011 welding rod, so they really work well. So make sure you wear gloves and safety glasses, and let's get welding. Okay, let's see what happens here. Let's have a look. Okay, we'll just put that down right there. Oh, look at that. Looks like 2 batteries. Two batteries gives you pretty good penetration. Look at that. I know my welds aren't very good, but with time you get better. Sorry about that noise alert. Yeah, lots of penetration there with 2 batteries. I think if I was welding a thinner metal, probably I would only use 1 battery. Well, let's weld the rest of this up. Almost finished. One more little spot there. Oh, there we go. Boy, look at that. That really works well. Ooh, that's hot. Boy, that's hot. Yeah, I wouldn't think that would work so good, but appreciate that. That worked really well. That worked great. Yeah, let's see here. Yeah, that'll hold together really well. Now, let's, I'm going to have to bore some holes in this, so we're going to have to make some marks. So we'll go right there in the center. And be sure to use lubricant before you start drilling in your steel, or it'll burn your drill bit up. There we go. I come out here to make sure our holes lined up first, and they do. They seem to work pretty well, so that ought to work. Okay, I've put some tape around that to save the threads, keep them from getting contaminated with weld. And I've got that positioned. I've got a big washer there to add support underneath the nut. I've got everything all lined up, and I'm ready to weld. Again, safety is utmost important, so make sure and have your eyes and your hands and a proper welding helmet before you start welding. Wow, just super penetrating. That works so good. That's incredible. Okay. Alright, there's our deal here. Alright, let's tap this off and clean it up. Alright, there you go. Special thanks today to Ichiban Motors and for their cutting, grinding, and especially their welding. I appreciate all the help from that website. Okay, let's go see if this works now. Watch this bad boy function. Look at that, coming right off. Here she comes. So I think I should be able to shut this off, because I'm going to have to catch it with that. So there you go. And you know what's neat about that is I didn't move the keyway. The keyway is there, and the key is there. Didn't move it. Okay, these bolts come off, and underneath this is a cork seal. I'll show you in a minute. No smoke. Thought I'd mow my lawn before it started raining. It's supposed to have an event, so I'm not getting any smoke out of this. Thinking probably it just had a stuck ring. The valve opened, was an intake valve, so I'm thinking it probably sat out in the rain. No air filter or cover on it, and it probably got moisture on the valve and it stuck it. It unstuck really easy. No smoke means the bore's probably good. And with the other engine I have, and this being smooth, if this gets wore out, which I don't see it happening because I change the oil, I might have this for a really long time. We had another event last night, and this is it. And essentially what it is, it's a car going by.
There's a car right there. You can't see it because he's got his lights off. Let's wait for this to get out of the way. And he shoots right there. He'll do it again.
It's not a shot though. It's fireworks. He's throwing fireworks out the door. So that's what woke the wife up last night. But that being said, what's great about this is having cameras. Have cameras on your house, and you can see all the nonsense that goes on at night. It works really well. Okay, back to the tractor. I found this in my box of gaskets. I bought a gasket kit for this tractor. Actually, I bought two gasket kits, one for this tractor and one for the other. They were the same. They were full of gaskets that did not match this tractor. So I'm thinking they're probably for a, I want to say 70, but that's a G. I think it's a 60. I don't know. Or an older A maybe. But I had a bunch of stuff in it that wasn't for it. I also, when I was going across that whole mess, I found that, and that's a nice little piece. That's a power takeoff cover, and so we'll have to look at that and see if it even fits this tractor. I don't know if it does. I think it does. I think I bought it for my B and it was for an A. I don't know. Anyways, we're going to take these bolts off here, and it's nice having yeah, that's going to happen. Hold on. It's nice having ratcheting boxes. They work really well. Nothing says Valentine's Day love like good tools. Got these for my wife. Awful nice of her. Handy. Let's take those four loose, and it will be a miraculous thing if that gasket's the same. There's a, this has to come off too. There's a screw right here. If I can get it out, probably can't. Probably have to work at it. There it is. And that screw right there is your keyway to tell you where your flywheel goes. So take this off and immediately lose it. There's a nice little spot up here that things don't go anywhere. Right up in there in that cylinder, right there. So that little hole right there. You put it in there for safekeeping. And we'll get this off and have a look what's underneath there. Okay, this is how that comes off. The bolts come off of there. And that comes off. There's your gasket. So that might miraculously fit the gasket. Lay this aside. There's a collar here. Generally, the collar won't come off unless you take some emery WD. Collar will come off. We'll see what our seal looks like underneath this. Yeah, here's our seal right here. You see it right here? I'm going to dig it out of there. It's fractured right there. It's broken right there. That's why we have an oil leak. So there's the piece that we're going to have to replace. As you see, it's coming out in pieces and crumbs. So there you go. When you put this back together, this has to index on the flywheel. It's got a little pin on the flywheel so the whole thing spins. So we get a new seal in there, and we get it, and we'll put it back together. In the meantime, I'm going to take these bolts into the garage, and I'm going to clean them all up and clean the threads up, because when you're way down in here with your hands, you want them to go on easy. You don't want this tight, loose thing. So let's go into the garage and clean these up. I've sprayed a little rem oil on them and wire brushed them, working them back and forth like this. And then what I want is that to be able to just, the bolt to just up and down real easy. So that should be alright. Another thing I found in my stash of stuff is these are like hen's teeth that aren't broken. I had taken the carburetor and this goes from the governor to the carburetor, and mine was broken, and so I ended up having to kind of bend it over and fudge it and make it work and that kind of stuff. That goes to the carburetor, and that goes to the governor side. But this one is intact, and it's the correct one. It's not an Indian-made one. It's got a little bend to it, but we should straighten that. It's not a problem. And I want to put that on there while I have my carburetor off also. So we'll do that as well. Okay. Well, I should have my head examined for the hole that's in it. But got to looking at putting that little flap on right there. And then I started looking at this, and my pump's is leaking. This is my hydraulic pump for my rock shafts, and in order to reseal that, you have to drain the 90 weight out of the out of the transmission. This was sitting in a hayfield in McAllister, and somebody had come by and caught it on fire. I don't know how they caught it on fire. I think probably they dumped some gasoline on it and lit it on fire. It had since the crankcase and the transmission were just full of water, had the 90 weight or the engine oil caught fire, probably would have burnt the babbitt out of the bearings, and then it would have been the end of it. Regardless, these things usually get a lot of water in them, and every one I've ever seen was seized up. There's a big piston in there, and it gets seized up because nobody uses it, nobody changes the oil. The only way to change the oil on these is to pull that apart. There might be a plug on the bottom. I haven't seen it yet, but I think in my experience the only way to change the oil on these is to pull that. And it was full of water, and when I put oil in it, it got all milky. So I need to probably change that out. Like I said, I need to have my head examined. So first thing we got to do is, in this magnificently giant greasy job, is to pull all the 90 weight out of it. So let's do that next. Mind you understand that that's the transmission. The oil filter's there, but the oil drain is in front of the oil filter. So that's the transmission. This is the second time I've drained this. The first time I drained it, it was at 7 gallons of water in it. look at my other video. Should be a little water in it right now because there's a condensation thing that goes on with these here tract orbs. Yeah, look at that. Nice and golden. Molson golden. Yeah, we're going to get close here. And going to have to shut you off real quick. Almost had a catastrophe. Comes out of there faster than you think. So we're going to let that drain, and we should be able to take the gear pump off now without having too much of a mess. First thing you have to do is take off the 3 bolts holding this gizmo on. Oh, nice. Like some water or something there. Feels like there's a seal there of some sort. Yeah, or was a seal at one time. Big bearing there. Then you got to take out the other bolts, all those around there. I think that's 90 weight. It's out of the transmission. So I pulled this piece off, and it's got an outer portion here that I'm sure I'm going to have to reseal. And I think in order to get that, you have to pull the clip off. I'll have to take it in the garage and look at it. And when I pulled this out, I don't know if this is the 90 weight or if this is just oil, but stuff like this was coming out of it. Oh, geez, look at that. Grizzly. It is kind of milky looking, so I'm thinking it probably had a lot of water in it. Maybe that is the oil that I put in there, and maybe it doesn't run off of it yet. I don't think it runs off the transmission, and it's highly possible I didn't have to drain the transmission. So, yeah, there you go. There's that gear. Isn't that cool? Look at that giant gear. Look at the size of that thing. Look at that. Okay. I'm going to take this plug out and this plug out too and see what happens. Maybe not this plug, but this plug. Probably a big spring behind that plug. Something, I don't know. See if I can drain that valve body too. See what's behind that. In order to get that plug out, I found the drain. I took a 1/2 inch to 3/4 adapter and I hammered it onto the end of that. And then I used a wrench and a big long piece of pipe as a cheater to get that off there. So that should come off. Now this one here is being quite a booger too, so I don't have something that's going to get that off. So I don't know what we're going to use there. But we'll put some tape around them so they don't do that anymore. Some Teflon tape. Keep them from seizing up. We'll see what's in there. Okay, I went into the garage with this and I cleaned this stuff up. This does have a gasket on the outside of it. So I'm just going to use some of that on there and put the cap over the top of it. This has a felt seal, and I put some engine lube after I cleaned it all up, some engine assembly lube grease on it, just to help it when we get it all together. This gear housing is pinned, and it was pretty difficult. I had to put a little heat on that before I pried it out of there, so you might have to too, and a little tapping and a little persuasion. This had no gaskets, so I'm going to clean it up and put it together with a little bit of that. All my nuts and bolts I cleaned up, and the lock washers were broken on them, a lot of them. So what I did is I got into my stash and I just got some new lock washers. I'm using all the original fasteners. The plug that I ended up I pounded a 9/16 on it. It stripped it, or a 5/8. It stripped it, so I pounded a 9/16 on it, and it finally let loose. I tried everything, but it's in an odd place. It's hard to get to. So I put some tape on that. It's Teflon tape, and it's if you put Teflon tape on your plugs, they're so much easier to get out. I have a new plug for the one on the bottom because I really cheesed that one up. So the other one I just kind of ground down a little bit. It'll work. It'll be okay. And like I said, I have some new lock washers. Okay, let's get this cleaned up and we'll start assembling. I'm putting the stuff on real thin, and I'm making sure everything's clean, and I'm really grinding it in. I'm going to do the same thing to the casing. I'm going to check that and make sure it's not binding up on anything. We'll snug those all up. We'll put our plug at the bottom and our plug at the bottom of that. There's where your oil fill is. I'm going to use 1030, and this petcock right here, when you open this petcock up and oil comes out of it, you're full. So I don't know, don't ask me what the rest of that stuff's for, but I know that's what that's for. So let's put this together, and we should be done. Clean it all up. There we go, we got it all together. We're going to put our oil in there. I'll have to go and get me a gallon. I think it's going to hold about 3 quarts. It's going to come out that petcock. Again, the reason why I did this is because A, it had a bunch of water, and I know it had a bunch of water in it because the oil was milky. And it leaked. So I need to fix the leak, and I think I fixed the leak. I've got the drain plugs fixed too, and so this ought to be a unit that you can service now. We're going to put our transmission fluid back in. It fills in right here, right there. 5 gallons. So let's do that.